I have no idea who's watching this. Probably zero people. If you are watching this, welcome. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate that. Um, and let's actually take a look at what we're going to work on this whole time. Well, I said we, but mostly it's going to be me probably, unless like you want to help in the chat. But anyway, let's give this a shot. So anyway, we are clicking on this thing. So yeah, okay, we can see on the screen this Connect 4 game. All right, so this is the thing that we're trying to make. Except the kicker here is I'm going to try and build Connect 5. That doesn't really involve much of a change, but you know, it makes it special for me because like trying to build something like kind of new, kind of innovative here. So adding an extra checker seems like the right way to go there. So anyway, here's what it looks like. So this is the Connect 4 game. You know, you click at the top, and then the checker goes down to the bottom. So this is the version that we're shooting for. Or like, I don't know, maybe we'll make something a little bit more stylized than this. Who knows? Probably not actually, and probably instead we'll just focus on getting something working. And in particular, focusing on doing this with more of the things that we've learned about during the first 2 weeks of rhythm school, including, so when we first did this exercise, we learned about object-oriented programming, and that's why we did this exercise. But in the subsequent, like, I don't know, 7 days, 6 days or so, we learned a little bit more that might be useful here, including like breaking programs up into multiple files, which you can sort of see on the screen right now an example of all these different files that another project called Hack or Snooze has been done in. So you can see, for example, that you have the models file and the stories file and the nav file. We don't need to go into the details of this other project, Hack or Snooze, the clone of Hacker News. But suffice it to say that the different JS files drive different parts of the functionality of that program. So for example, this script, this JS file drives the navigation bar at the top of the screen of this news app, and this user file does stuff specific to a particular user. And then you've got the models file, which handles most of the, get out of here panel, most of the things, like most of the big objects that we're dealing with when working on this other project. So I said just a moment ago we're not going to go into detail on this, but let's go into a little bit more detail. So we'll do fold all, and we can use this to sort of like get the beginning of an idea about how we might approach this Connect 5. So first, you can see in this models file that we have different classes for story, the story list. So you have like the whole list on this news website, which holds each instance of a bunch of story objects. And then you have the last class, user, which allows for a logged in user to do stuff, mainly submit stories and favorite stories. So we could work that into this Connect 5 app well, let's start thinking about this now. So what is involved in a Connect 5 app? Well, let's start clicking around and find out. So we have a game board, for instance. So this is similar to the Jeopardy thing, but I'm not going to go into I'm going to go into very little detail in the Jeopardy app because that's that's proprietary information probably. It's a homework assignment. So I'll just say there's Jeopardy, but and there's a game board. So maybe we could have a class for a game board, and perhaps we can have a class for like a particular piece, and maybe we would also have a class for a player, because you can see like there are 2 players for this Connect 4 game, one red, one blue. So it might make sense to have a player class. Let's write this stuff down. I'm kind of self-conscious about writing stuff while on a live stream because you're not going to be able to see that. If I had another camera, you might be able to do that, but that's not the case here. This is a low-budget operation. But anyway, so I noted that we could have classes for the game board, players, or just player. Um, Maybe we could have one for piece, but that seems like it might just be um, one of the methods in the player class. Not sure how I would handle that. Um, what other things do we have on the site? So, taking our inspiration from this hack or snooze thing that we've got on the screen right now, in which we had story, story list, and user. I suppose that would be it. I mean, what else have we got here? So let's fold. Well, actually, let's look around in this particular app for just like more definitions of classes. And I think that all of that stuff is simply in models. So if I'm case sensitive here, no results found. That's odd. Is this the case sensitive button? Match case, yes. So we do class. Oh, okay. When defining a class, it's not the keyword class that's capitalized, but rather you get camel case for each of the like actual things you're naming, like story and story list. Oops. All right, so let's take a look here. So class and then space. Would that be a way to look it up? Class space story list, class user. And this is looking in models.js. Yeah, so it looks like the structure for this is pretty minimal, and like I could take that as inspiration for building up the classes in this Connect 5 app too. So we might have a class for something like game board, a class for a player. So similar here, the analogies here would be story list would be like the analogy for the game board, and user would be the analogy for the player. Now, one interesting thing to note there is that in this game, we're going to have two players, but they're still both a player. So presumably we could instantiate two um, instances of the player object to handle like the red and the blue. And you know, I'm thinking about like ways to extend this right now, and I want to get fancy with this, but it's like it'll be difficult enough for me to just like get any kind of basic functionality such that I'm not going to try and introduce player 3, player 4. How many players would you like to play Connect 5 with? We're not going to ask that question. We're just going to say, this is a two-player game. But I still think that we could do class of, not story, but rather game board, and then a class of player. So I was tempted just then to like just go and start coding, but I think we're just going to keep writing stuff down, and I'm going to also orient myself in this live stream to see like what is going on here. Am I actually streaming? What is happening? So I'm going to click this learn more button, and I'll also become silent as I kind of explore around. So bear with me here. Current bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate. Whoops. We recommend that you use a stream bitrate of at least this much. All right, so that's probably why you're seeing a relatively low frame rate here. Sorry about that, but we're gonna roll with this. Let me look at some other stuff off screen to prepare here. All right, so that's probably an improvement that we could make for this later. So needs higher bit rate. All right, great. The reason I'm making this face right now is because my streaming software seems to be protesting this action. I don't know if I'm crashing right now or am I still here? It's hard to tell. Who knows? Alright, that's as much real estate as this screen is going to get. I realize that this is not what you've come here for. And I apologize for this. Alright. Okay, so I think what we'll do is, I mentioned a moment ago that I was going to resist the urge to just jump in and start coding, but I think that's actually what we're going to do. So let's open up a new file, jump in and start coding and see where that takes us. maybe that's not exactly the right way to do this, but I have no better ideas. And this, if I just sit here and kind of write on my notepad, that seems like it'll make for a boring live stream. So I'm trying to do two things at once, right? I'm trying to like make Connect 5, but also like provide some kind of entertainment. Not entertainment really so much as like a document of my thoughts here. And talking to this rubber duck wasn't sufficient. So I'm going to try talking to the camera. So that's how we're going to approach this. All right. And I could resize Windows all day, but I think also we're not going to do that either. So let's close this file here, this whole folder, close that. And let's make a new one. right, so what file structure should we use here? What kind of organization should we have? So with the other apps that we worked on, we had like the models and we had the stuff to handle the nav bar, the stuff to handle the stories. So maybe we have another one that just handles the game board. Um, let's take a look before we do that into the directory that we worked on. Hack or snooze. So cd yeah, so we had main, models, nav, stories, and user. So we could probably do something, we probably don't need a nav here. Um, Stories would be something like, well, this is going to be, that refers to the API calls. I don't think that we're going to need that. Let's definitely go with models.js, and that'll hold the couple of class names that we'll work with. So models.js, main.js, we'll do the orchestration. And then after that, I guess it'll just be stories. I suppose that we don't really need user, although let's look at that file to see like what kind of stuff happened in user.js. So stories, the analogy there would be, we could just do game board, I suppose. So game.js. And let's take a look at user. So code user.js. So we have a global object to hold a user instance of the currently logged in user. So an analogy there might be like, okay, we can have global variables to represent each of the two players that exist, like when you're running the game. So you could do like let player one, let player two, and each of those things. So here, this is just being instantiated to undefined, and then presumably later, that variable then gets set to an instance of a user. So let's see, current user equals current user await user.login, yeah. Or user.signup. Yeah, so you're instantiating a user in one of three ways. Like they're logging in, they're signing up, or they've closed their browser and then they're trying to log in using a token that's already stored locally. And that's how you're instantiating that instance of user when originally it just gets set to undefined. So that could be a strategy that we take. So anyway, yeah, I think that having a JS file for a player might make sense here. Although, like, I'm hesitant to do that because I've noted down 3 files so far: models, main, game, and now I'm saying, okay, there will also be a player JS file, whereas the original version of Connect 4 that you're seeing on the right side of the screen right now only has a single file. So it's like, do I split this up really into 4 files? I guess the answer is yes. So let's try that. So let's say player.js. That'll be the 4th of our 4 JavaScript files. All right. So what does a game board have? So a game board What else does a game board have? So as we're playing Connect 4, it's got like a user interface, of course, right? It doesn't just have these positions, information about whose turn it is, a way to check whether someone's won. It has a way of displaying it too. Does that go? I wonder whether that goes into the game board class. I actually can't recall whether like the display stuff actually went in there too. Although in the projects that we've worked on so far, if I recall correctly, all of the classes were defined in a file like this, in a models file. So and I'm hesitant to like go back and double check that because like we said, we're doing this from scratch right now. I've already contaminated that urge or contaminated that like guideline a little bit by going over to the other file and seeing like, okay, going over to the other folder and seeing how was the hack or snooze project structured. But that doesn't mean we need to keep we need to keep doing it that way. So yeah, I think that a way to display it makes sense here. So bear with me for a second as I put some music on here. Display properties for the game board. All right. what does a player have? Has a piece color, but then like why even have a piece class, right? Player has a piece color, a win state, but the game board has that, right? What can a player do in a game of Connect 4? A player can put down pieces, and that's it. Like, the player can have a turn, right? So it can be a. What have I done? Can either be your turn or not your turn. But again, isn't that encapsulated in the game board itself? You know, it occurs to me right now that we've worked on two versions of Connect 4. One of them was the OOP themed version, and it had a little bit more functionality than this one. So let's actually back up a little bit and let's not look at that stuff, but let's go to this Connect 4. Yeah, so I don't want to look at the instructions. I really just want to see like the end product and then see if I can get there myself. But let's go to the OOP version here. So what was it? Here's how to get there. Connect. The OOP. There we go. No, don't want to get the code. Let's look at the handout. Yeah, so here's, it's a little bit, it has a little bit more information about the players here. For example, like you can choose colors. So yeah, we noted this here, piece color. Does a player have, and the detail here is, does a player have a piece? And why even is piece a class then? I mean, I guess it's relevant. Like you could instantiate a piece, and the piece can like slide down the board. Okay, maybe it's a shorter class, but sure. Like we can make it its own class. All right. Player 1 color, tomato, and player 2 color is like cyan. All right. So I think that's the only additional functionality um, that we get in this version of Connect 4. And you can see how it doesn't go off the page. And then at the end of the game, what happens? So I'm going to Connect 4 with Cyan now. I click, and it gives an alert that says the Cyan player won. Okay. Alright, so that's the little bit more functionality that the OOP version has. Like, it allows you to choose a color for the player at the beginning. Alright, so what does a player class have? What is a player object going to have? A piece color. It can either be your turn or not your turn. Again, does that go in the game board? What happens in a game of Connect 5? So we're going to need to make a game board after, I guess, letting the players choose their colors. Make a game board. Actually, in this version of the app, the form doesn't disappear. On form submission, it disappears. No, that's not right. It's just this. The game board is displayed. So make a game board. Display the game board. I'm saying the game board. Now, there's two like different versions of the board, though, right? And this is a concept that I'm still getting used to. Not only is there the game board that's on the DOM, but there's also the source of truth, for lack of better term from me, game board that just exists as like a JavaScript object, or like even just a JavaScript variable. Yeah, you could call it an object. I mean, we have one above here, right? It's called class game board. So display the game board on the DOM. In the class game board, that's mainly, so when we talk about a class of game board, that thing is mainly like the behind the scenes JavaScript that is driving the thing that's on the DOM. So like while the game board class may contain things that are relevant to the, and will contain things that are relevant to the display of the board on the DOM, it primarily exists to like be that behind the scenes thing. Anyway, this is what's happening. So display the game board on the DOM, and then like we need to listen for clicks. Alternate the players' turns. Keep checking for a win every time a piece is placed. Also watch the stalemate or filled board case. We can just call that stalemate, right? Also watch for the stalemate case. I guess that's what happens in a game of Connect 5. So we let the players choose their colors using a small form. On the form submission, the game board is displayed. So now we're making the game board. How does that happen? Well, it's like a grid, and in the HTML that's going to be just a table, right? So, and one of the rows of the table is that head row. Normally that would be used to display like column information, like information about each individual column of a table. And then you have the cells, like the TD elements. Each of those TDs is going to be used to either have, initially it will be null, each of them will be null, but then they can contain pieces, which I'll represent, I guess, by A or B, or rather just by like an instance of the piece class. Could do it that way, and I like the idea of representing those by instances of the piece class. So in the original version of Connect 4, we just had we had an array, not a table. So let's distinguish the two things. You have the DOM thing, like I talked about before, and you also have JavaScript thing, the JavaScript object, and the the object, like the original version of that object was, excuse me, an array, um, and that array was just like a 5 by 6. So in other words, it was an array of arrays. Each one of the rows, each one of the like most deeply nested rows represented a row on the game board. And in that initial version of Connect 4, there were 3 things that could be in each one of the nested arrays there. That's either null to represent no piece there, 1 or 2 to represent player 1 or player 2 going there. Here instead, what we're going to have is a game board class, an instance of a game board, which has like all the functions of the game board. It's like checking to see if someone's won. It's doing all the stuff relevant to the game board. It's, well, checking to see if someone's won, checking to see if the board is filled and therefore it's a stalemate. What else does a game board do? It's like the thing that is listening for clicks, at least the top row of the game board is doing that. But that's more of a DOM thing, isn't it? And is the game board the thing that is alternating the players' turns? It wouldn't make sense for a player to keep track of. Let's think about that. I just was going to say it doesn't make sense for a player to keep track of whose turn it is, but perhaps it could. Like perhaps it could be a property on the player class that says like current turn and is set to false if it's not their turn, and is set to true if it is their turn. Yeah, so you could pass like into the player object or set like player current turn equals this. But I think I like that. I think I like the idea of that being done on the game board better. Why? Why do I like that better? It's because like if we were to do that in the game board object, that is keep track of whose turn it is, then I suppose that you could pass, like the game board itself could have a property like current players, which is an array of each of the player instances. And then it could be like player 1 dot current turn equals true, or player 1 dot my turn equals true. It seems like the game board could be hogging all of the all of the functionality here, though. So I'm kind of looking also for excuses to like put some of the functionality not inside the game board, but inside some of these other things, just to get the practice of like distributing some of the work across like all of this script. So like that's kind of an artificial reason to want to make the functionality for like whose turn is it inside the player class, but like maybe that'll still work. Piece doesn't have shape or other display characteristics. Yeah, and if player is pretty sparse, then piece is like extremely sparse. And I don't know, like should there even be a piece class? It's like you put an instance of a piece on the board. I mean, I guess so. Even if it's like very minimal, it would still make sense to do it, wouldn't it? Alright, yeah, we're gonna roll with that. Alright, note zone. What happens in a game of Connect 5? Let the players choose their colors. On form submission, a game board is displayed. Make a game board, and then include a top row that allows for clicking to drop a piece. The rest of the rows, which could be a variable number, can contain pieces A or be null. Yeah, and in video games, you don't have player A and B, you have player 1 and 2. Display the game board on the DOM. Listen for clicks and fill the board or refuse to fill it appropriately. And keep alternating the players' turns and checking for the win every time a piece is placed, and also watching for a stalemate. Right, I guess that's what happens in a game of Connect 5. So, I guess at this point we can go in and start like putting the basic structure of the game together. Um, so let's do that. Let's go and put the basic structure of the game together in the index.html, and then we'll start um, fleshing it out with the JavaScript. Well, okay, we could do one of two things, right? So we could start working on the JavaScript to like underlie the game, or we can start working on the display to get me like a better sense of what needs to happen in the game. I kind of like that idea better, so let's go there. So let's go to index.html. And I think the shortcut for this is triple bang. Is that right? Triple bang, and then abbreviation doctype.html. Okay, I thought that we were going to get the full boilerplate. Emmet abbreviation. There it is. All right. Let's try and use some Emmet stuff here. So how does that happen? Form action equals. Okay. Not gonna need that. So form input type text, I think. Does an input tag not need to be ended like that? I guess not. Because of what VS Code is trying to do there. Is that right? Button type equals submit. Definitely has two T's. generally the game is going to look something like this. So table, right? And then it's going to have do you need a TR if you're doing a T head? I'll literally get just 5 of these, right? So we've made it with 6 elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. All right. It's kind of all over the place, isn't it? So that should be between the slashes here, right? So you should have a TR and then stop TR, and then you should start a new TR. Start it, stop it, start it, stop it, and start it. And then stop it. Then you start it. Okay. So how many do we have? We should have a total of 5 rows here. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 these blocks. All right. And each of them are six rows wide. So I guess that each of these, like this HTML doesn't necessarily even need to exist right now. But I guess I'm also just giving myself an idea of what the structure will look like later on. So, I don't know. I guess that's all right. And of course, this won't be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's either going to be null, it's going to be 1 or 2, and then depending on what each of those things contain, again, in the JavaScript version of this object and not in the HTML, the thing on the DOM that I'm writing right now. Although that's another distinction, isn't it? So right now, what we're looking at is HTML, which is like similar to but not the same thing as the DOM. The DOM is like the thing that JavaScript can manipulate that like then communicates with the page about what to do there. Yeah. All right. So, well, anyway, we'll fill this in too. All right. So that's the head row where we're going to be able to click and drop pieces. Okay. I guess we can start like assigning things to this table, right? So for instance, we could say table ID is game board. I guess we'll just call it ID game. And thenthead ID equals selection row. Let's think about that for a second. Thead ID equals selection row. Okay. All right, that's fine. And then at the bottom here, we're gonna have our script tags to make sure that this works. So script src, I think it's src, equals, and then we'll write all of our script sources. So models, what else? What else do we have? Main. I guess that one can go last. Game and player. And let's get some more practice with jQuery. Let's include jQuery with this project. So how do we do that? I am going to look that up because I don't know the line that is used to activate jQuery on a project. How to include jQuery. Let's go to the jQuery docs website. Oh no, okay, this is all we need. So jQuery library is a single JavaScript file. Notice that the script tag is there. There's production, there's development. All right. Place the downloaded file in the same directory as the pages where you wish to use it. So that's, yeah, I remember we were using a line of code that had the URL unpackage in it. Oh, here's another example. If you don't want to host it yourself, you can get it from a CDN. Google does this. Does this link currently work? So let's see. Almost certainly does. All right. Well, let's do it from the same place that Rhythm School is doing it though. Unpackage jQuery min. jQuery CDN. Unpackage. Where's jQuery? Alright, that's the one. Oops. think that's how to do that. And presumably that needs to go above all the other ones. Maybe even in the head tag. Just to be safe, I'm gonna put all these scripts into the head tag actually. Why does it do that? Alright. Models, game, player, main, just one main. Okay. Let's not work on the constructor for the game board just yet. Instead, let's work on something a little bit easier, which is a constructor for the player. Alright, so how to set up a board. Well, one of the relevant things here is how many rows and columns, and I think I'd like to work with a flexible number of rows and columns here. So let's incorporate that detail now. Let's put the music back on. All right, so constructor, this position equals. Okay. I was gonna say we could assign some global variables to do that, but shouldn't do that. Let's instead say in the constructor we'll get the width. Is that too vague if I just use width? I think that's actually fine because there's probably nothing else in the game board that width could refer to. So width and height. Generally speaking, we use X and Y, so width and height would make sense. So this positions, yes. This board width. Yeah, let's go with board width, and let's just call it the same thing in the constructor. Board height. Got a little typo here. Now, there's a temptation that I have to declare the dependencies. The reason I considered just now whether to set the board width and height is because I was doing the setup board function, and you know there's an argument to be made that the board width and height should go there, should be declared explicitly, but I don't think I need to do that, and I think it's pretty clear that the board is going to depend on the width and the height, so let's just not declare that dependency. I feel uncomfortable doing that, so I'll say instead of with no input, I'll say oh, but hang on a second. Alright, so with no input, yeah, we can still do this, right? So this dot board height, this dot positions equals this dot setup board. But after I've declared that, I can now say board width. Oh no, because it's happening in this function. So the parameters that the constructor function come with, I can then refer to in this setup board function that I'm working with now. So that's okay. So yeah, let's be explicit about these dependencies. So board height. Yes. So now I need to update this doc string. It says with no input. Inputs height and width. This function returns an array to keep track of where each player has moved. An array to track where each player has moved. Let's keep it on 2 lines there. Alright, so what is a good way to make an array of arrays? that looks like, so what is this board going to look like? It's going to look something like that, right? I wonder if we could do it like this. I don't think an array has the repeat function on it. So instead we can do it like this. And we can do const as well, right? Yeah, because we're just going to mutate this thing, so it's okay to do it with const. That fruit fly is history now, in case you were wondering. Okay, I equals 0, I less than board height, I plus plus. And every time that happens, we're going to push another empty array to the board. I'm hesitant, so I called it positions on line 19. And on line 30, I'm calling a similar thing board. And I'm hesitant to like call the game board's property board because it's kind of like the essence of the whole thing. It's like calling and yet like that seems to be pretty natural. Like positions is more accurate though, isn't it? And game board is like this broader thing that does everything that the board needs to do. It does all the things like on lines 3 to 6, and even more of the things that we wrote in the notes zone down here. So I guess we'll call it positions for now, but I'll reserve the right to change that name later. And by the way, when using the setup board function, we did not use the board width. Yeah, actually, it's not sufficient to just fill this with a bunch of arrays. So initially I was like, let's fill this array with empty arrays representing each row of the board, but that's not sufficient. We need to, in addition to filling in the rows, we need to fill in the columns too. And right now I'm thinking that we need to fill this whole thing with nulls. So instead of just board.push the empty array, let's leave that actually. Doing the opposite of what I said. Alright, uncomment that. But let's have an inner loop as well to say for let j equals 0. And this is going to be, okay, so we're doing height first and then the width on the inner loop. Does that make sense? It seems like counterintuitive because usually when you're talking about an XY plane, you talk about the X first and then the Y. But yeah, I think it makes sense to add each of the rows, and then on the inner loop, we're going to fill that with several null values to represent each of the columns in that row. So yeah, that makes sense to do it this way. J is less than board width, and then J++. and then we can do board at element I push a null. Okay. All right, and let's try that out. So let's break open some debugging tools here and get to work actually looking to see if the game board is is behaving properly so far. So this is their version of the app. Oh, here's something else. So I just noted here. I'll scroll back and forth between these two apps. So one is the finished product, and one, which is on the screen now, is mine. So I'd like to introduce a little bit of extra color onto my game board so that we can see, okay, hey, we're looking at the version that we're actually working on right now, so that I don't get confused somewhere along the line by saying, gee, I wonder why this code or the appearance of the site hasn't changed at all. This is something that my partner and I learned during the hack or snooze exercise. So let's do that now. And in fact, that's an excuse to just start a CS file here. I think we've already started it though. Style.css, yes we have. All right, so we'll just say one line here that says body background color. We want to go with something very subtle here. So like I'm just gonna type a letter at random, T. What do we have with T? So we can go with turquoise, we go with tan, which we're not doing. Let's pick another letter at random. Navajo white. What about X? Nothing suggested. What about Z? No. A? Get a little off-white going here. That's like barely perceptible, so let's not do that. We've already rejected tan, so I'm not doing wheat. Rosy brown. What about royal blue? It's a little bit too much. How about B? Pickarandomcolor.com is show you a website. Color, random color. This is taking way too long. Randomcolor.com. Alright, that's pretty good. Alright, there's a color. You can't stop the signal. Here we go. Background color 91C3F2. Alright, thanks randomcolor.com. Body background color. I've not linked to the styles.css here. So how do you link to a styles file? Is that style or is that link? I think it's link. Rel style sheet. Thanks VS Code. href is style.css. I think that's how you do that. And it didn't give me a closing tag for the link. Oh, it's pretty close to the MVB color here. Look at that. That's pretty cool. It's kind of subliminal. It's like, that's why we're picking that random color. It's because it's my house's color. It's almost it. It's not quite Midnight Path, but it's pretty close to it. Anyway, we're going with that color of 91C3F2. It's going to be our Connect 5 color, at least for now. All right, so what are we doing here? We're debugging the game board. So let's try and make a game board. How do we do that? We go to the console, clear, and then we say let GB equal new game board Board width is going to be 6 and board height is going to be 5. Board width is not defined. Okay. Yeah, on line 24 I didn't put the board width in there. So let's keep the order. Board width, there it is. Board height, yeah, I think that's right. Hard refresh. GB, game board, board width 6, board height 5, positions, array 5. The positions I'm expecting to be an array, a 6 by 5 array filled with nulls. 6 by 5 array filled with nulls. Good. Okay. All right, what next? So the game board is filled appropriately in the constructor when we instantiate a game board, an instance of the game board. Okay, so that is done. Next, I guess, well, let's just go down to the note zone. So what happens in a game of Connect 5? By the way, if we're doing Connect 5, probably we need a bigger game board. What is it, 6 by 5? So like, let's make our let's make our default game board like, I don't know. We did 6 by 5, so we'll just make it 7 by 6, right? That'll be our default. I'll make a little note to myself to say XY equals 7, 6. Of course, like we're letting the game board be of a variable size, so that's like kind of irrelevant. But for testing purposes, we'll do a 7 by 6 board. All right. What did I say? 7. Okay, so back down to the note zone. On form submission, the game board is displayed. So you make a game board, include a top row that allows, so positions, yeah, so the positions part of the board is like distinct from that top row. That's gonna be like, the top row is really gonna only be a user interface thing as opposed to a keeping track of positions thing. So I kind of like how we're calling it positions, calling that part of it positions as opposed to board, because it could start to get ambiguous as to like, well, what exact like part of the UI or part of this whole like thing does positions refer to, or does board refer to. All right, so rest of the rows, variable number, I'm going to get rid of that comment because we've decided that we're going to indeed have a variable number here that can contain pieces represented either by 1 or 2 or be null. Yep. And you know, originally, like in the first version of Connect 4 that we did, of course they were represented by 1 or 2, but in our positions array on the game board object, maybe instead we have like instances of the piece class filling that positions array. Not sure, but that seems to make sense. All right. So I'm noticing that it is 30 minutes past the hour right now. It's half past. So that's all that I've agreed to do in this live stream, and I need a little break right now. So I think I've gotten some good momentum starting this. I've gotten what I needed out of the live stream, which is like a reason to actually get started on this project, um, a reason to talk through some of the initial design of the whole thing, and like actually writing a little bit of the code for it. So I've got a good start on this right now, and I'm going to go take a break. I'm going to end the live stream, go take a break for at maximum 15 minutes, and then get back to this by myself and off camera, coding up Connect 5. But anyway, if you've joined me, which I still don't know whether anyone's actually joined me, thank you for doing so. If you're watching this in my future, then well, thank you for doing that. This has been Connect 5, and thank you for watching. All right, that's it. I guess we're gonna click this stop streaming button, huh?